Hi, everybody. Mike Bloom here with another Survivor 50 preseason podcast as I'm giving you what you need to know about the cast of Survivor 50. Today, break out your sandboxes because it's time to play with Dr. Christian Hubicki. Of course, a dear friend of the podcast, someone who popped immediately within seconds on screen in David versus Goliath, went from a David to a Goliath in the process. But what figure will he be his second time around in his highly anticipated return to Survivor? Now, look, in talking about Survivor's favorite robot scientist, I could think of no better person than our resident robot himself. So, here to talk with me about all things Dr. Hubicki is Taran Armstrong.
Hello. I'm so excited. I can't believe we're here to talk about Christian on Survivor again. I knew it would happen at some point, but I'm excited for that point to be today.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because I think certainly when 50 was announced as a returning player season, there were these people in the late 30s, right, that just due to the theme of Winners at War, never got a chance to return. And we're seeing a lot of them. We're seeing your Devons, you're seeing your Chrissy, your Angelina. Christian was certainly on there, but did you always expect, no matter what, he was going to be a lock? Or was there any concern of like, this might be the forgotten era of Survivor in lieu of like the flashy new era?
Christian was my number one pick on the board for a player to when we did a draft for player to
Yeah.
return for 50. I had so much confidence. I think he's a hot commodity. I think that um Christian is everything you want in casting for his archetype, and that is huge. He is such a nerd, but and he comes with all of the things that a nerd comes with when you put him on a show like this. But he was also really good socially, really good strategically, has a great head for the game, even delivered in challenges. And so, and just above all, I think really entertaining, and I assume really great to work with on production side. And so it just felt to me like there is no single person who can be better at his archetype than him. He just really is the pinnacle of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly well said. I think Christian is so bountiful with his language. And I say that as like a fellow gregarious person myself, but one of the many things I love about him, both as a character and a person, is that he is more than happy to sit you down and explain a concept to you. It is one of the first big character moments we see is Dave versus Goliath. He's able to smash the Goliath's expectations of winning that challenge by acing a slide puzzle, and we get a whole time lapse montage of him talking about all the different ways he actually could have done better on the slide puzzle, considering he built an algorithm. This is a man whose phrase is basically talk nerdy to me. Like, especially getting to hear him over the course of him being a frequent podcast guest, like, he is so lovingly obsessed with the minutia and complicated strategy and details that, as you mentioned, he sort of serves this dual purpose in not only being a big, fun, comedic character, so good with the one-liners, but also being someone with a really good head for the game and a really good head for especially the new era model of things, where there are so many trinkets and baubles that could allow votes to go in so many different directions.
Yeah, it just works. You know, sometimes you get people who don't look like nerds, but they're really nerds, or maybe they're like pretty athletic, but they're also pretty nerdy. Turns out, maybe even somebody like Sam from 46 or 7 or
47,
whatever,
yeah.
is an example of that, of like a guy that doesn't look like a nerd, but he's pretty nerdy. He plays, Blood on the Clock Tower with us. He's great at it. But Christian looks like a nerd while still being very handsome, if I do say so
Oh,
myself.
yeah.
Sounds like a nerd, but but has so much charisma and so much to him. As you said, he's funny, he's endearing. I mean, the audience fell in love with him when he played this game, and for good reason. Many of the people on the island fell in love with him, which is really like the big thing about Christian, which is that he is so perfect as he is that it it seems like it's a bit of a problem for him on the island. He's actually, and this is not often the case, but he is actually just too likable
Hmm.
uh, to be super successful at Survivor, and that is his biggest flaw.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. I look back to the first tribal council he attended, and he makes this incredibly apt metaphor about how, getting on a roller coaster, you have to sort of subsist on the fear that things might go wrong, and that's how you sort of pursue every vote in Survivor. And everyone's like, "Wow, he's great, isn't he?" And like, that's the issue. Well, we'll get into this, Taran, but like when we talk about sparkly personalities, this man is a disco ball. He's able to bring the charm apocalypse. And there's even a moment later on in the season where Gabby's like, I don't understand. Like, I have trouble opening up in front of a lot of different types of people, but like Christian's able to just succeed by being himself. Christian himself will say, I'm becoming this Goliath like figure from these David origins. The only problem with being a Goliath is that you are a very, very large presence and can easily be taken down.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is the issue for him. It's the issue that he faced on his season, which is that he kind of started in a slightly vulnerable position, very quickly managed to develop relationships and allies, got himself into a better position, and then really didn't have to go to tribal all that often until midway through. Kind of was in a good, powerful position for a couple of rounds, and then pretty quickly, like, struggled to maintain that power structure because pretty much at almost every point, every turn, at least one of his allies was like, okay, we got to take him out though now, right? Like he's too good, he's too likable. We got to turn on him. And that is the danger, right? Now, I do think that on a cast full of all-stars, full of really charismatic big personalities, I feel like this is a place where he might be able to shine because yeah, he's so likable, but there are tons of threats and
Mm.
likable players and all kinds of people that could help uh, blend that shine in, so to speak. That would be the ideal.
Well, Christian is one of the best numbers men around, so it only makes sense that we look at his numbers, get into the code of what makes Christian Hubicki tick. So Christian is currently 40 years old, originally from David versus Goliath, where he placed ultimately in seventh, having played 35 days. He won 6 challenges in the pre-merge. To your point about I think he only went to tribal council once for the entirety of the
Mhm.
pre-merge. Won 3 individual challenges, including a rather infamous endurance challenge, Uncomfortably Numb, where he had to essentially hold a set of handles for as long as he could, and decided to essentially filibuster, use Jeff and the other contestants as a captive audience to go on a myriad of subjects. People have been jockeying for ages to release the full 6-hour Christian Hubicki cut. We have yet to see it. Maybe if he wins, he'll be able to splurge to do so. But Taran, the important thing perhaps to note out of this entire base of
Mhm.
statistics is the votes against 18. A
Is still the
near,
record?
I believe that 19 might be it. It might be, I'm trying to remember who holds the record with 19, but Christian, because Christian says in the season, the record is 19, and he just
Mm.
barely misses out on 18. And it all comes from the post merge. And a lot of it comes from 2 very specific votes. One, the second vote after the merge, where, as you mentioned, it's still a David versus Goliath game, and they're all like, all right, well, we got to pick a David to target. Christian is the most threatening out of all of them. So they pile all their votes on him. Davey's able to come through in the clutch, plays the idol that he found on Christian and saves him. And then a few rounds later, now the David call is coming from inside the house here. David on David violence, as Christian's closest ally, Gabby, decides, okay, now it's my turn to feel that Christian is too threatening. And so they turn the majority onto him. And then he plays an idol to negate
Mhm.
the votes against him. So this was a man who was consistently in the line of fire, which is wild considering that in a season called David versus Goliath, the reason why Christian got picked for that first challenge is because like he kind of looks like the biggest David out of all the Davids, right? And so one of the many amazing things about this season is the fact that this was sort of the final boss.
Mhm.
This was the guy that everyone wanted to take down, to the point where they only got him on his third life in the game.
Yeah, and this was, this was sort of before the meta game of Survivor was just chop down the tallest head. That really became the meta of the new era. But it was like you needed to cut down Christian, and it did. There was a lot of like stuff like maybe if Gabby hadn't turned when she did, he might have had the numbers. He might not have, having to survive that vote put an even bigger target on his back because now he'd survived 2 votes with an idol. He does have a very famous method for finding the idol that he
Breath first
found.
search, yeah.
Yes, which I believe was like search a lot of places a little bit, not a little bit of a small amount of places, a lot. And then he finds the idol while explaining. Again, it's just like exactly what I'm talking about when I say such a great character,
Yeah.
because very few characters on Survivor are going to be able to like explain to you, here's my special method for finding idols, and then succeed in finding the idol at the same time. So just great stuff there. And yeah, a lot of votes against Christian. He was really the belle of the ball that
Uh,
season.
I will say, doing a little bit of fact checking here. Actually, the record was first off going into Christian's season was held by Laura Moret in Blood versus Water, and that was only after she was technically voted out twice in the game. But he was then soon beaten, but a year later by Karishma Patel, who got 22 votes against her in Island of the Idols. So, Christian hopefully won't add too much to his record in season 50. Taran, is there like a quintessential Christian move or moment for you that you feel accomplishes the near impossible task of like serving as the best microcosm of what Christian is as a Survivor player?
I mean, I think the idol find is probably that one. If I had to name another one, it's probably unfortunately the ones that we've already talked about. But I think the winning the immunity challenge while giving his big speech was probably another one. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
I really like that one because there is the comedic perspective on it, right? Asking Jeff what a macaron was and about Reuben sandwiches, and apparently a lot more. I believe he was the one who like told Jeff to bring back the Fallen Comrades challenge, I think, or some sort of other old school element. But then there's a moment where like it's him and Alec
mhm,
like needs this.
yeah.
Otherwise, he will go home. And Alec looks over at him and he says, like, I need this. You don't. And Christian says, I know, but I may never get a chance at this again. And like you could feel the heart and the emotion that he brings. That's sort of Christian in a nutshell. I think that's a very
Mhm.
good choice because like it's this idea that again, he's this quirky, fun dude, but he does have a lot of heart to him. He gets his loved one's letter from his dad, and he says, like, I hope you accomplish 3 things out there: find an idol, go to a feast, and make Jeff Probst laugh. And so it's just like that surprisingly like down to earth personality as well, combined with the outrageous quirkiness that we know and love, does make him truly like a once in a generation character.
For sure, yeah. When I think about Christian on Survivor, I think my first thought is that immunity win and the filibustering. So I think that's probably the thing that people would remember him most for. So I think that's a pretty good one.
What, Taryn, do you think is Christian's biggest strength as a player?
His biggest strength. Okay, so obviously we're talking about Christian on Survivor, but I also have a lot of experience playing little social strategy games with
Mhm.
Christian personally. And so, I have maybe a small amount of insight in terms of like the way he kind of approaches games. So for instance, we play this game Blood on the Clock Tower. You can find some Survivor players playing Blood on the Clock Tower on
Including
their
maybe one
YouTube
person
channel.
from this cast.
There you go. Um, and Christian is a player who, when we were starting to play, would come in with like full notes of every role, what it did. In my head at least, it's like a full spreadsheet of like all the possible permutations of like, okay, well, if it's this, then it can't be that. And meanwhile, the rest of us are just kind of winging it, like, what does this one do again? Okay, it says right here. He comes in very, very prepared. He really approaches things methodically. And he is somebody that feels very trustworthy. because he is. When he's on your side, he feels like somebody you can lean on. He is going to be supporting you, coming up with good plans. He makes for a really great ally in that sense. And it's part of why I would imagine if I ever played a game where I had to compete against him in a final two, I also would then need to like cut him at some point. Luckily, I haven't played those kinds of games with him. But there is one other thing about Christian in playing these games with him that I've noticed that surprised me, which is that he's actually a very good liar also.
He is, and that's the thing is that he has so much conviction behind the way he usually speaks that it actually does a really nice job of masking the lies from the truth
Mhm.
because he brings that exact same enthusiasm, right? It's not like when you try to catch somebody in a lie and they all of a sudden get defensive and feisty, like that is sort of the energy that Christian kind of always operates at, which is this level of passion that it's like, I can't tell if you're really jazzed because you figured the game out or you're really jazzed because you're getting away with it.
Yeah, and like for me, the way I work through personally, I work through Christian as a player is that he's very good at lying, but he's not often a very proactive liar.
Mm.
He's often a defensive liar, and so that's how I try to personally like get a read on him. Um, and I think that translates to what we saw in Survivor as well, where he was often the person being betrayed, not doing the betraying. I do think he is a fairly loyal player who will stick with his allies. He's just like, if you think you're going to be able to like rattle him and get some kind of like truth from him, like, oh, should I play an idol Christian? Like he's probably going to be able to lie to you and pretty convincingly. Um, but as an ally, so reliable and so dependable, and that's what could potentially make him dangerous if he does decide to turn on you at some point. But he's not the kind of player I think that will actively look to do that very often, which
Mm.
was in some ways his downfall. Maybe should have believed more that people were turning on him on his season because he maybe trusted a little too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when he sort of gets alerted, oh, the votes might be coming your way. I think that does legitimately take him by surprise, and maybe part of it is sort of like this journey of self discovery of like, I'm the one that you think is the
Mm.
most dangerous out of this entire group. But it does take a little bit for him to pivot, and he does still have a little bit of leeway. He and Gabby help make this move against Carl, but then it's only a matter of time before everyone turns on him again. And I think you made a really good point that Christian, at least through David versus Goliath, was a very reactive player as opposed to a proactive player. Now, granted, again, he had very few votes in the pre-merge to necessarily work off of that. And so I would imagine that Christian is such an analytical person that he has that in mind. And I could see a world where with these returning players, we always talk about like how much are they going to replicate, the tenets of their previous games. I could see Christian very easily being like, all right, I do need to be a little bit more forward facing. I do need to make plans A, B, and C. Cause I think that he's someone who is so methodical, as you were mentioning, that, when I talked with him, I did an exit interview with him after Dave versus Goliath. He said, like, I had a preseason playbook and I largely forgot it. I could see him making the playbook again and committing it to memory to make sure that any scenario that could unfold, he's ready for it.
Yeah, and I would also imagine, again, given the level of preparation he will often put in, because again, don't get it twisted here. Like Christian is a competitive guy.
Yes. Yes.
Like when we play these little games with him, he gets into it, and sometimes, like many of us do, like there will occasionally be a time like you like got too into it and needed to like blow off some steam. Like he's a competitive guy, and he's not gonna just like be there for a good time. He's going to be prepping. He's going to be making sure he's doing everything he can. And I think he also is somebody that knew he would have a good chance of coming back at some point.
Mm.
And so had that in mind as well. I have to imagine that he's done a lot of prep work on studying the other players that I don't remember exactly like if they knew exactly who else was going to be on the cast at whatever time, but he very likely had a decent idea of many of the people that he'd be playing with. And even if he didn't know exactly what the cast list was, he's somebody who keeps up with Survivor pretty closely, so he would already have a pretty decent idea, and is a decent, I would say, like networker. He's good at developing relationships and maintaining them.
Yeah, I mean,
He's
I would say he is, of the pre-40 people, the most connected to those from the new era, just through the interactions he's made with
mm,
them.
exactly. And so I do think he has a lot of opportunity, having, again, played some games with people, talked with people, been on podcasts. He also, of course, has, I think, a decent amount of connection to some of the slightly more old school players, maybe not like old school, but mid school players. And so, and he, I think, will get along very well with all kinds of different people. I mean, that is a major part of who Christian
Oh,
is
yeah.
that like it's very difficult to dislike him, and he will be able to fit in wherever he goes. Um, and so that's incredibly valuable. And what I was going to say before too is that like when I do play these games with him occasionally, he's somebody that will like reach out after the game and like want to do a little bit of a download occasionally on like what happened, or just like he'll just like pop into my stream occasionally and like just send me a DM of like oh hey, you were talking about this, like here's a thought that I had, like just genuinely curious about other people and cares to go and interact with them, which is not something that I'm good at. So it's very, very useful, I think. And again, I really hope it serves him in this season. There's a lot of variables, but I do think there's a chance that he could do well here.
Well, let's talk about some of those variables, shall we? Let's get into the cast of Survivor 50, because you talk about him possibly being a connector to a lot of people across a lot of different eras. But I got to start with the center of the web here, and the fact that Christian is alongside two people who he not only played with, but also who voted him out, in David versus Goliath, in Angelina and Mike. So I'm curious, Taran, because listen, it's been what, 7, 8 years since they last played. Mike did get Christian in a cameo in the White Lotus season 3. Are bygones bygones? Or as you mentioned before, does Christian still have a little of that shark in him to perhaps make up for what they did to him last time they were in Fiji?
I don't. Christian is not the kind of player to hold grudges at all, in my opinion. He is very much a just like strategy first, like what makes the most amount of sense. And on top of that, like for instance, he voted for Mike to win
Yeah.
when he was in the
When
final
Mike
three.
apparently said, "Do not vote for me."
So I have to imagine that their relationship already is pretty good anyway. And it very much just makes sense for the three of them to be working together. I don't know what his relationship with either of them is like at the moment, but I can't imagine that they'd be actively working against each other for a very long time in the game. It's like Christian, Mike, like these are like very late game end game problems if you're on Survivor 50 and it's a cast of like, 40 people. I think this is a strong, solid base to work from. And if anything, my fear would be that a lot of people who want to work with Mike White specifically, who has a much bigger profile than he even did the previous time he played, may look at Christian as sort of like an obstacle to that and
Hmm.
want to remove him so that they can be closer to Mike.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, a bit of an impediment. Well, you mentioned it before, or at least you alluded to it. Looking to the new era, Christian, of course, frequents a lot of social strategy games like Blood on the Clock Tower, and so has Emily Flippin.
Hmm.
And listen, Christian loves an Emily in his life, but it seems like they brokered, I think, some sort of friendship over getting to do this. Do you think there is going to be sort of like a kindred spirit here in finding Emily out there? Or could this be a matter of like, I see how good she can be in these games. We got to take her out sooner rather than later.
My fear actually is the inverse of that. I think
Oh,
that Emily might be somebody that looks at Christian as like, oh, he's too good at these things. Whereas Christian may look at Emily as like, hey, we have a connection. Let's work together. I feel
mm,
like Emily is the kind of player who could be in his blind spot, who may actually take a shot at him sooner than he anticipates. But I don't know Emily as much, although I have played with her. She is very dangerous when you play these games, in this, in like how unpredictable she can be at times, at least, having not played with her enough to be able to learn a pattern, I guess. And so but she's very smart and very just very quick to like not get stuck in anything. Like you might think that you have Emily on your side, and then all of a sudden she'll be like, "Wait a minute, what are you up to?" And it's
yeah.
like, "No, no, don't look at me." So that would be my fear for Christian with Emily. But I think again, I would have to imagine that initially they would gravitate toward one another if they have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think Christian is a person who is more than happy to keep these people in his proximity and then sort of like expel the gravitational field once it gets to a certain point. And he's like, okay, I've relied on you to get me past, the initial stages of the game where I might get picked off early because of my preconceived notions. Now we need to start game hunting here. And I think Christian wasn't able to necessarily experience it that much in David versus Goliath, considering that he was the hunted. He was the one that people were consistently shooting at. I think if he got the power, if he got the weapon in his hands, he would try not to miss. He would try to make sure to take out those big people because he knows firsthand the danger that can come in letting those big threats stay around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about the rest of the new era here in particular? Again, Christian goes to a lot of these events, is on chat BCC, does a lot of liaising with people in the new era. But from like a personality perspective, do you feel like he might vibe with anyone in particular?
I think he would vibe pretty well with Aubrey.
Hmm.
Of course, a fellow kind of nerdy self-identifier. Um, I think that, I think there's a lot of people that, Genevieve, Camilla, Charlie, like I could see just a lot of those like newer era people vibing with the Chrissy, I think would get along with him really well.
I think Chrissy and Christian, I mean, maybe it's just the
Yeah.
similarity in name, but like I could absolutely see them in lockstep. They're both numbers
Yeah.
nerds. They both were able to like impress despite maybe the archetypical circumstances being against them. I think they're not afraid to work with bigger players, but also take out bigger players that are against them. I mean, I guess let's look at that top row here, Taran, because this is maybe the most intriguing part of the entire
Yeah.
board. Looking at Jenna, Colby, Stephanie, Suri, are we flagging any people one way or the other that might be feeling a certain way about him?
Those are some of my bigger fears.
Mm,
Really the first six, if you include Ozzy and Coach too.
yeah.
I fear of almost all of these people. Suri is probably my top fear for Christian. Because Suri is like the person on the board who is like one power level above him when it comes to social mist.
Uh-huh.
And if she sees how good he is socially, and he's very smart, and she's had some relatively recent experience dealing with like the nerdier archetype on Big Brother. Um,
Oh,
I
no.
feel like I feel like she may be a little concerned about somebody like Christian, and would have the ability to do like Saria, and we've seen this on Survivor every time she plays. Sari's the kind of person who will single out a big threat like Christian and just be like, no, it has to be him.
Yeah.
And so I very much would fear for him with Sari. Coach and Ozzy both dealt with Cochran in pretty
Mm.
negative ways. And he is the most Cochran like player on the cast, I would say. Um, so there's a little bit of fear that they might have some PTSD from that. Then you've got like the bigger old school players like Colby and Jenna and Stephanie. Colby, like this, kind of guy's guy who's like from way back. I don't know enough about Colby and like who he gets along with, but he,
Yeah.
like
I'm
Christian is the kind of guy who can get along with a Colby, but like Christian kind of being like a star of the newer era, I don't know how much the older school players will feel a little bit like, nah, like back in my day we were like rugged, and now we've got like nerds on the beach, you
That's
know?
that's that's the interesting thing is that it almost serves as like a microcosm of society, not to use that, typical aphorism when describing Survivor. And like Colby was the cool guy back in the early 2000s, right? When it was all
Mhm.
about this rugged man's man with a shit Quattro and a Pontiac Aztec. And then like the cool guy on David versus Goliath, the it guy, was Christian, the guy who goes on for hours at a time about a slide puzzle algorithm, and maybe a reflection of how nerds were cool again in the 2010s. And so like, I mean, I am both titillated yet utterly bum puzzled by the idea of like what the two of them would have a conversation about. I do agree with you that I think Christian would be more than happy to entertain a conversation with Colby. Also, him being a super duper fan, like he would just love to hear any stories about the old days from him. I don't know if outside of that topic of conversation, Colby will have a lot to talk about with Christian on the inverse.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about this cast, or when I've thought about it before, I think there's a pretty heavy contingent of like broy dudes
Mm.
between Colby, kind of maybe Ozzy. You could even throw in Coach, who kind of maybe sees himself that way. And then you've got Joe in there, somebody like, I think Kyle, maybe even Q could fit in, and of course Jonathan is going to be
Hmm.
like there's a lot of these like big dude characters that if they come together would be very dangerous. I think that if there are enough of them, they wouldn't be threatened by Christian, and he could fit in. And maybe like individually he could, like, I think Christian could like fit in well with Joe, for instance.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So you think back to the Brochachos, right? Like on
Yeah,
paper, that wouldn't have been able to succeed whatsoever, but he was the comptroller of Slamtown. He got along swimmingly with John Hennigan and Dan.
exactly, exactly. So I think it's not like the bro stuff is not the worst for Christian, because he knows how to like work well with like the more broy characters. But I don't even know if that's actually going to manifest itself. That's just like my own pet theory, especially coming from a Big Brother perspective.
All right. Well, Taryn, I have but one more question for you, and it's an important one. Why will Dr. Christian Hubicki win Survivor 50?
He will win Survivor 50 because he is incredibly skilled at, I think, almost every aspect of Survivor. And his biggest weakness is how visible he is, how much he shines, how much of a target he has on him when he plays. And in a cast full of really visible, really big targets, that negative downside is lessened, it's diminished. And so we are hopefully going to see the full force Christian, not being held back by there being too big of a target on his back, get to really go out there and play. And I think if it works out in that way, I think he'll be very dangerous, and I absolutely think he could win.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the point because we talk about this with a lot of people, right? Like, well, they were the big threats on their season, so they're probably going to get looked at the same way. But when there's so many around, you can kind of hide among them in a manner of speaking. I mean, that was Tony's entire philosophy with the Lions versus the Hyenas of obscuring yourself within those that have a big threat level to yours. And I think that Christian would have the ability to do that, would have the capacity to do that, while also having the personality and personability to be able to build those relationships too that could even supersede any preconceived notions of like this guy is dangerous, he needs to be taken out ASAP. And I do think, especially if he comes in with a proactive plan to correct some of the not even mistakes, but like the game approaches that he had last time versus this time, along with some possible new era connections, I don't know. I don't want to wish Cass too much, but I love Christian dearly as a friend, as a person, as a player, as a character. And so selfishly, I just want as much of him as possible. Billie Eilish Boomerang, Jimmy Fallon be damned.
Yes, there you go. I listen, I like to have low expectations. So we'll see what happens, but I'm very, very excited at the very least to watch him play, and I really hope that he had a good time out there.
Same, same. I hope we watched a lot of great movies on the flight, at least. Well, Taran, this was a fantastic time getting to talk through the game of Christian Hubicki. I love the perspective you brought as well as someone who single-handedly got to watch Christian work as perhaps a strategist in some of these smaller games. Anything else you'd like to say about Christian? Anything you'd like to plug out there? You have had quite the busy fall, my friend.
I have. Well, first of all, you can find I have a my own Patreon that I'm currently working very hard on, doing tons of reaction videos. I'm watching episodes of shows with myself in the corner, reacting, pausing, analyzing, all kinds of fun stuff. And so that's like basically any reality, like competitive reality show you can think of, Traders, Squid Game, The Challenge, Survivor when it happens. That you can find it over there. I'm doing lots of fun stuff. And of course, I also wrote a book about Big Brother. If you haven't watched Big Brother at all before, you might be very interested to learn some stuff about it. And Behind the Mirror, it is written to be accessible for anybody who hasn't even seen the show at all. So you can check that out as well.
Christian, if you're listening to this, buy that book. I know how much you disparage the game of Big Brother, or at least the show product. So get educated, learn a bit, read it. It's excellent. Check it out, as all you should too. If you have not dabbled in the Big Brother yet, as a game concept, it is. There's a reason why Taran has dedicated his life to it. It's really cool, just from all the possibilities that can exist, much like the stuff that Christian is able to present himself. So I would like to hear from you all, considering again how much of an RHAP familiar Christian is, what you think his chances of succeeding might be. Is he going to be able to bring the charm apocalypse once more? Do you think he might get caught out early? What do we think might happen with him and Angelina? And Mike, could the David take down the two Goliaths? Only time will tell, as we get to see Christian make his long-awaited return to our screens on February 25th. Next up, we continue our breadth first search on the cast of Survivor 50 by talking about, you said her, Taran, someone who is perhaps a level even above Christian when it comes to that social miss. We are talking about Cirie Fields, former Big Brother player, coming back for a record 6th time on Survivor. We'll talk about everything that makes her an absolute living legend, why she has not had the ability to take home the W just yet, but how she might in Survivor 50. Thank you all so much for listening. Taran, thank you, as always, for your wonderful insights. Until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.